so I'm ready to start the game Storm of Steel here. We're starting in summer 1914, the summer quarter, and at the minute there's only one impulse. So the first phase is a strategy card phase, so each side chooses their strategy cards. I've already done that. The next is the grand diplomacy phase. First we check morale. Whoever has the highest morale can go first. We've both got the same morale, but has anybody chosen a grand diplomacy card? No. I couldn't remember what I'd chosen for the Entente. Peace negotiation would go first. We're obviously not at that point now. Contingency cards are the ones playable in the grand grand diplomacy phase. So I'll just give you a quick look. So the Central Powers have chosen von Moltke, the Elder Plan. That's an Eastern Front campaign card, and they've chosen a contingency card. And then the Entente have chosen an Eastern Front card, a Western Front card, and a Weapons Tactics card rather than contingency. And actually looking at this, the Colonial campaign card is actually played during the Grand Diplomacy segment. So that's great. So I play this card now, and we go to the Grand Colonial campaign table. There's one for the Central Powers and one for the Entente. Now, I don't know if you can see that. And so I've got these in a folder, so there's a bit of kind of fuzz as it comes out for you. But essentially we just roll 1d6, there's no modifiers. On a 1, oh no! The 1 is the only effect that is bad for the Central Powers. They rolled a 1. Allies seize German colony. Reduce Central Powers morale by 5. Immediately, the first effect of the war. Some diplomatic manoeuvrings and a blunder. Central Powers fire one of their ambassadors and lose 5 morale from the get-go. We could have had a 2 and no effect. We could have had high sea raiding from Central Powers cruisers. That would have taken 5 morale off the Entente. There could have been an airship raiding Africa. That would have taken 5 morale off the Entente. We could have stirred up some result. There could have been a campaign in East Africa. We could have actually have eliminated British corps-sized unit in East Africa. And both of those would have also resulted in minus 5 morale for the Entente. So that backfired terribly. Never mind. We move on, and we next have the psychological warfare phase. So first, both players secretly allocate the agents to psychological warfare missions. Then they reveal them and resolve them. Now that reveals a gap in my rules, because I've read most of the rules, but I often when I start games like this, I skim through them and then I read the rules as and when I need them. I prefer to start playing to see what happens. Although I did like with this one, took time to suss out the victory conditions quite carefully, because that is obviously important. So hang on a minute while I check the rules. Oh yes, it's as I sort of suspected or remembered that we have no psychological warfare agents ready yet, because they have to be bought, as it were, within the mobilisation phase, which happens later in the turn. So unfortunately we can't enter into that excitement yet. So now we move straight to the operations phase. So the Central Powers start. They've revealed any campaign cards that they have chosen. So if it's the first impulse. And I can also reveal a contingency card now, or I could save it for another impulse. But I've played that contingency card. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to do, was to check to see if this card comes back on a 6 or more. It doesn't. So I rolled a 1, good, so I can play that again and get another chance. Okay, so von Moltke, the Elder plan. Immediately we get 3 more impulses, what the central powers do, so we get the full 4 impulses possible in summer. We don't get any combat shifts. We have an objective. We want to capture any 2 Russian cities. If we fail, we have a 20 morale point loss. And then we discarded the Schleifen plan because of that. I mentioned that in the previous video on the war aims, and because of that we've also redeployed. I actually did that on setup because I chose my setup depending on which plan I was going to follow. So we redeploy 4 headquarters and their armies over in the east from the Western Front. So that's all been done. Now we go to the reorganization phase. So we can convert any friendly units from mobile to entrenched, but not in the first game turn. Nobody can entrench at this point in the war. I don't need to do any reorganization because no one's broken down, and I can't make larger cores at the moment. That happens later in the war. Then we go to the movement phase. The central powers player may move some, none, or all, blah, blah, blah. So this is it, movement phase, then combat phase. So here is the position on the Eastern Front. I won't do all the movement in front of you, but essentially these are the 2 cities which the Germans are intending to capture. Considering that, well, they don't know, but the Central Powers might have extra impulse this turn as well. But that means that at least that the first impulse they're going to have to create a screening force across here and move fellows up there pretty quickly. The Russians do have some reserves in Petrograd that could move down to reinforce there. That's a risk we're going to have to take. First prime thing we have to note is that units must be within command radius of headquarters to utilise the extra impulses in a turn which you obtain from that objective or campaign card. So we're going to have to move headquarters up there. Fortunately, the Germans have a command radius of 3. Russian headquarters only 1, so it's going to be a lot slower, their movement capabilities. The other thing to note is that apart from normal movement, we have 3 types of strategic movement possible. There's forced march, in which you cannot leave or enter an enemy zone of control, and you have to be within the command radius plus 1 of a headquarters, but you have triple movement rate. Or you could rail move. Now that obviously won't be successful into Russia. You have to, as it were, repair railroads in foreign nations. And then there's also naval transport. So we do actually have some naval forces here. There's a transport there. Could have attempted an amphibious landing, but I don't think that's going to be successful. You can only do 1 unit per transport. We've only got 1 there. So, and you can't do amphibious landings against normal coast hexes. It has to be against cities or port hexes or even naval bases. So essentially we're looking at some rail movement to move units up and a bit of forced march to get our screen and units out. Also, another consideration here is that these hexes are actually swamp. So this hex isn't, but it's in the zone of control, so units would have to stop and move in there. So we have to move through the swamp to get clear into Russia. One thing I should mention at this point, really, the headquarters, is it doesn't matter which headquarter goes with which unit. So units are not designated according to their headquarters, i.e., you can shift units from headquarter to headquarter at will, as and when is necessary. Okay, so I have a headquarters here, and 1, 2, 3. These reserve units in Memel city there are within the range that they can use forced march, so they will get 6 movement points. And because these are fortress hexes, they actually don't exert a zone of control. There's no infantry units there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 to there. 4 to there. And another one, maybe that one there, that one there. Okay. Nice. An interesting thing to note is that cities and industrial centres, they exert what's called a city zone of control. So even if you have no combat unit in it, they exert the zone of control into their own hex, which means obviously that enemy units don't get free run just charging right through them, and that simulates clearing, local defence forces and population, and organising all that as a moving army moves in. Okay, that's going to be a blocking force there. And then we have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that one's going to have to go there. There's a whole army, 6 corps here. 1, 2, 3. 6, they will go there. So we've effectively cut off, with our zones of control, any immediate Russian reinforcement. What can we do with this cavalry unit? Oh, hang on, he couldn't go there, could he? Because you can't enter enemy zone of control. So, okay, he's there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. So we can extend him out there, blocking that railroad a bit further on. We've got these cavalry here. And these are going to try and engage those units, those Russian units on their border. And we have here 3 artillery siege engines. They can move up on the German rail net to there. And these will move up on the rail net to here.